Coming up next, the senator who wanted to make Delaware a sanctuary state reacts to Donald Trump. And if you haven't got your child immunized, you'll want to stay tuned. This is the Delaware Way. It is an interesting time in politics, and in politics in Delaware specifically. To talk more about that is Senator Brian Townsend. Sir, I always appreciate you coming back.
Thank you very much, Larry.
First, the last time you were here, you were running for Congress.
Yes.
And it didn't work out for you. What happened?
Oh, we came in second out of 6 Democrats in the September 13th primary. And I think that there were 2 or 3 really good candidates, and one just prevailed. And I think money played a big role. There's also a lot of excitement about what Lisa was bringing to the table. So she's continued to generate that over the past few months, and she seems to be doing very well in Washington.
Yeah, Lisa Blunt Rochester ended up winning and going to Congress. It was the first woman and the first African American to win in Congress. And it's difficult when you have one type of person running against 5 type of people, you know, in an election, and it was just time. I think a lot of people probably thought it's time to have an African American.
Certainly a lot of people felt it's time. A lot of my supporters said that we're supporting you for X, Y, and Z reasons, but we really like Lisa, and we heard the same from Lisa supporters. I think money also played a big role. We were pretty dramatically outspent, but that's what you see in politics nowadays, and it's unfortunate. But again, I think that you know, Lisa and what she's advocating for and how she's representing so far, I think is doing Delaware a great service.
By the way, I didn't mean to sound insensitive. That was James Carville I was quoting. He said 1 of something always beats 3 of something. And
no worries at all.
That was my.
And James Carville's never offended anybody, so quoting him is always a safe thing to do. But no, I understand your point. And again, that was real on the campaign trail. We saw that happening in real time. So again, I'm just glad that the campaign, especially Lisa's my campaign, were all very positive. And I think that's what you really need more than ever now in democracy, are people who might have differences in demographics, might have differences in viewpoints, might have differences in terms of funding, but are going to keep it on a really straight track. And that's what we did, and Lisa did, so we're very happy with that.
One of the problems in taping these shows so far in advance is that there's often news that happens in between, and the special election's going to happen. So we're not going to know which way the Senate has gone, whether it's Democratic or Republican. But I think I can ask a more general question. Is it good to have a state where it's Democrat right down the line?
Well, I think particularly now in terms of what Democrats stand for, it's extremely important to have that kind of state. Whether it's commitment to working families, whether it's commitment to trying to drive wages, whether it's commitment to equality, fundamental equality and acceptance, right? Whether it's immigrants or people of color, the LGBTQ community, whatever that acceptance is, it's really important to foster growth and inclusivity in society, to have good economic growth, to have good neighborly relations, all those things. And that's what the Democrats have really been standing more for recently. That said, Larry, what I would say is that the state house was under Republican control until 2008. So when on the state Senate side, people talk about 44 years of Democrats controlling the Senate, all of that time, almost entirely that time, 36 of those 44 years, there was a mix of Republican governors and the Republican state house. So it hasn't just been sort of one-party rule all this time.
In most of the country, it's Republican rule in the states, not Democratic rule. As you were actually one of the few states that have pure Democratic
Oh, I agree,
rule.
but I still think that the policies that people are put in place, and we've seen it the past few weeks of the Trump administration, we've seen it in his cabinet picks. It's one thing to campaign like he did talking about the common person, but it's another thing to appoint a cabinet that is the wealthiest by far in U.S. history. Several of the cabinet appointees for major positions don't have any experience in the areas that they're there for, or they pledge to undo the agencies they're now supposed to represent. So again, I think that yes, you're right. Across the country, the Republicans had sweeping victories this year and in previous years, but that doesn't make their policies what's actually going to help the U.S. economy and the Delaware economy grow.
No, but it does, and I don't want to belabor the point too much because I want to get into policy, but when you say this is what Americans want, this is what Americans believe in, is what we have espoused, they rejected that the last election.
And the irony is that in the week since, you have people who are avowed Trump supporters say, but wait a second, I want to see minimum wage go up. Or you have Trump supporters who say, well, yeah, I voted for Trump, but I want to keep my Affordable Care. I don't want Obamacare. I want to keep my Affordable Care Act coverage. And so they didn't even know those two were the same thing. So yes, they voted for who they wanted to vote for, though I will say Hillary by far had more in the popular vote. It's just that Trump won the Electoral College by a very small margin in a few states, ultimately. But I agree, yes, they voted for him, but a lot of times now they're sort of dismayed at his policies. And so how you square that circle, that's the reality of politics.
Yeah, I'm glad you said by a small majority in a few states, because he won by 60 electoral votes.
Correct.
The electoral votes wasn't close, but he won it by 3 states coming in within 25,000 to 100,000 votes.
Right. It's wild, the result there. And the impact that has on the future of America by a small number of people choosing to vote one way or the other or not vote at all.
Since you brought up Trump, and I think it's required now that it comes up in every single interview that you do, since you brought up Trump, I want to not talk about policy as much, but talk about this reinvigoration of the Democratic Party and the fact that people are taking to the streets and showing up at town halls like I haven't seen in the Democratic side for a long, long time. There has to be opportunities in that.
There's certainly opportunities for us to make sure that we as not just big D Democrats, but little d Democrats, people who care about civic engagement, people who care about participation in our governance and our government, do seize that opportunity to bring people in, to have them know that we are listening to their thoughts, listening to their concerns, listening to their opinions, and trying to craft policies that will help them. I agree with people who say that Democrats haven't focused enough on local and state elections over the past bunch of years. I think we focus so much on the presidential election only. We've seen it in the voter turnout numbers. I just think that for many years now, even a few decades perhaps or more, Democrats have not done as good a job as Republicans of engaging at that grassroots level.
Donald Trump has said he's going to punish sanctuary cities. He's going to punish sanctuary municipalities, states, and you were accused either rightfully or wrongfully of trying to push through Delaware as being a sanctuary state. Now that you're back in the Senate, will you try to push that through again?
Well, again, the reason why we paused that bill was because law enforcement came and said, we already do this. Like, we don't need a bill to do this. It makes good public safety sense, right? If you're a local law enforcement official in Delaware, you want to have public safety. You want someone who sees a crime to come report it.
You would not argue that when ICE issues an order to detain, that police should just let someone go?
Correct. No, if ICE has issued the appropriate warrants, right, based on due process and based on actual criminal conduct and threat to the public safety, yes, police should detain for sure. The issue is that ICE itself has not been enforcing a lot of those for coming to Delaware for one immigrant, for example, but especially for dozens or hundreds of people who are here illegally but not committing any crime. And that's really what we're talking about here. What I'm saying is that ICE orders themselves have actually gone after American citizens erroneously because sometimes you lack legal procedure to get it right. And secondly, ICE often tells local officials, we're not going to come pick up one person that you've detained for running a stop sign, right? We're just not going to do that. So the issue is...
Then you get into due process problems because you're holding somebody too long without any charges.
Right, or taxpayers are paying money to hold somebody who wasn't a threat or ran a stop sign, shouldn't do that. You know, but I think the issue here is not at all, I mean, there have been tragedies that have happened for people who shouldn't have been, you know, out on the streets or shouldn't have been allowed back in the country. Let's solve those. But we can solve those without using hateful language against immigrants at large. And that, I think, is what's been happening in politics.
And we have to go, I'm way over, but thank you. I always appreciate you and the conversation. Senator Brian Townsend, when we come back, let's talk about immunizations in the state and why you should get them when the Delaware Way returns.